Welcome back to From the Burbs to the Tetons. So I've had my new router for about a year now, and I thought it would be appropriate time to give an update on it. Now, the significant thing about this router is the AX band that was added to it, the AX protocol. And it really isn't referred that often to AX anymore. It's more referred to as Wi-Fi 6. So I'm going to refer to it as Wi-Fi 6 too. I have the Netgear RAX. I think R stands for router. I'm not sure. The AX part is pretty clear. It's for the new protocol. And 80 is their model number in that range. When I purchased it, there was a 40, an 80, and a 120. They've filled it out a bit more. I think there's 6 or 8 of them. I'll go ahead and put a link to their page of routers that they've got. And they just vary in, how many bands they have per hertz, those kind of things. So just look at them, compare them. If you have questions about them, why you might want to buy one versus the other, I'll try and answer it for you the best I can. So the whole reason I got this router was for 2 reasons. One, I wanted the new AX band, so that way when devices, clients talking to the server, because that's the way you should kind of look at this relationship. You have clients and server. They both have to talk the same protocol. So I wanted to get on AX, so as devices came out that were AX compatible, they would work with this router. The second thing was the mu-mimo capability. The mu-mimo capability is for it to actually have sub-channels at the router level. And from what I can tell, those mu-mimo channels work whether it's AX or not. One of the reasons I bought the 4K Fire Sticks is because they support mu-mimo, which is being able to use a sub-channel. A way to look at a sub-channel. So a sub-channel, if you remember in the old days when we actually got our TV off the airwaves, and even if you don't remember that and you get it some other way, but when there was a channel 4, there was a channel 4. Channel 5, I live in the Washington, D.C. area, so our main channels were 4, 5, 7, and 9. And I've got the antenna set up. If you go back and look at that video, and I had to go search, it found a 5.1, a 5.2, a 7.1, a 7.2, a 7.3, all these sub-channels. That's a good way to look at mu-mimo. mu-mimo, because of the new technology on antennas, both transmitting antennas and receiving antennas, they've been able to narrow the band megahertz that it recognizes without any bleeding over. And so therefore they could get a lot more in that band range. Before it used to be, we can only send out one TV channel there. Now we're so accurate on our bands that we can fit 8 TV channels in there. That's the same way to look at mu-mimo. So by having these other bands, the communication is much faster. It doesn't have to keep daisy chaining or swapping or switching between devices on the same channel. It can dedicate a channel to one device. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, please ask and down below any questions you have on that, and I'll try and answer them. One of the ways it's described often is, you have a highway. I used to have a 2-lane highway. Now I have a 40-lane highway. So besides the performance, you want reliability, which sounds kind of strange for a router, a Wi-Fi router. You expect it to be up all the time. But anytime you buy a bleeding edge product, there's going to be downtime for one reason or another. Or one of the BIOSes wasn't right, or something wasn't designed into it that they didn't think about, ahead of time because it's a new product. And there have been some problems with the router for me and other people. Don't buy the hype that it's broken. It's not. So let me explain what the situation is. So for about 8 months, it worked perfectly. I've then bought a Samsung everything router that's for smart devices. It's got 3 protocols built into it instead of just one. I'm going to do a whole video on just that product and all the different protocols and stuff like that for smart devices. But when I did that, it needed a major BIOS update. I don't know why. It didn't look like it was sitting on the shelf for over a year. The product's only been out 3 or 4 months when I bought it. But it took quite a while, and it was a significant update to the BIOS. And I thought, you know what? I haven't checked the BIOS on this thing for 8 months. So I went ahead and upgraded the router BIOS too, and everything worked fine for about a week to maybe 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, the higher channel, the 5 megahertz band, would just drop out. It would just like disappear. And the 2.4 gigahertz would sometimes, but it didn't seem to affect that one as much. And for the longest time, because of the BIOS update that I did kind of coincided a little bit with when these problems started. I thought, oh, it's the BIOS, it's the BIOS, it's the BIOS. So I went up onto the support bulletin board and looked to see if anybody else was having the problem. And it has been reported several times on the 120 and the 80. And there were a couple of guys who seemed to be, a step above where I am, my knowledge on routers and network protocols and things like that. And they had done a deep dive into some of this stuff. And one of them suggested that it might be the NTP protocol. That is the Network Time Protocol. It's a service that you go out and ping, and it will send you back what time it is. That way you can update the time on whatever your device is. Like Windows does that on a weekly basis. That's why your Windows 10 probably has the right time 99% of the time. I digress there though, but that wasn't the problem. I experimented using the federal one from the U.S. government, and that one, the service died a couple of times, and it didn't affect the connectivity. So that kind of ruled it out, but I left it with Google because Google was unbelievably reliable. Every time I went in and checked it for like a week, it was up and running and attached. The second one is that all of these bands have channels, and the channels are just like the channels on the TV we talked about earlier with the mu-mimo, where it splits it into sub-channels. And the 2.4 megahertz, the older and slower band, you can actually put it on auto, so every time it boots up, it'll try and find a band that nobody's using. You can also manually set it. Now, with the 5, I had to manually set it. And with this being kind of a hit or miss problem, I had to go ahead and try a channel, leave it for a couple of weeks and see how it went, and kind of, kept a mental note of like, okay, I had to reboot 10 times in 2 weeks versus, what I'm expecting in a 2 to 3 week period is rebooting once. And so I went through several channels, and I know it's the channel because eventually I landed on channel 120. And it had only been there maybe 2 days, and it worked fine for the first 2 days. Then on the third day, it crapped out. It wasn't working, so I came down, rebooted the router, and I've never not had it reboot and not work and come up and start working again immediately. So I did that, nothing. So I rebooted it a second time. Again, nothing. So within 15 minutes, I rebooted it twice, and there was still no connectivity or anything. So I thought, well, maybe it's the Fire Sticks, because the Fire Sticks seem to be the most sensitive out of all the devices. My phone seems to be the least sensitive. And I rebooted the Fire Stick, still nothing. I also noticed that the neighbor that I talked about earlier, both of his channels were gone too. So I came back down and thought, okay, I'll try another channel. I changed it to 104 and rebooted, and it came right up. And for the last 6 weeks, I think I've rebooted maybe 2 or 3 times. There was a Sunday morning for some reason around 10 o'clock. I had to boot it at 10 and then at 11. Was pretty weird and strange and everything. But other than that, I've just rebooted it kind of like what I was doing before, which was like about every 3 or 4 weeks. It would just get wrapped around the axle, and I just assumed it was because of BIOSes and stuff like that, and I'd have to reboot it. So channel 104 has pretty much gotten me back to where I was at the beginning of all of this stuff as far as reliability goes. So if you're out there looking and people are complaining and saying, oh, it's crap and I need to send it back, it's horrible, don't believe them. That's not what it is. There's something else communicating here that the router is picking up. And you can't go ahead and complain about that too much as far as, you know, the way I see it. You've got Wi-Fi 6, which is the most sensitive Wi-Fi protocol that we have. That's how it can have all of these channels from ɪṛɣᴏ, right? So you can have the 40-lane highway. And it's why it'll go another 200 or 300 feet standard for connectivity, because it's more sensitive. Well, if it's more sensitive to the signal it's looking for, it's also going to be more sensitive to the signal it's not looking for. And that's just part of the growing pains of this protocol. And I'm sure what will happen is there'll be a Wi-Fi 6A that'll come out eventually, which hopefully will address this problem of the new sensitive antennas doing a better job of ignoring things that they don't want to, that have nothing to do with what we're trying to do with our router, and keep running effectively and efficiently. And the other thing is, too, it's not a Netgear thing, because while I was up on the bulletin boards, there was one gentleman who, I'm assuming it's a gentleman, sorry, one person, that said they went ahead and got the Asus top-of-the-line one, too, that was out, and he said he ran into the same problem. You've got two different brands having the same kind of problem. It's not the individual routers, it's the protocol. And like I said, my gut is telling me it's just because now the antennas are so sensitive, there might be, quote unquote, too sensitive. And the protocol just needs to be tweaked more so those extra sensitive antennas block out the noise that seems to be crapping out the channel. And I know I put mine at 104. If you're having this problem, it definitely could be a different channel. I mean, the environment around here with the townhouses I have and all the other stuff are completely different than the environment I'm going to run into when I'm out in Driggs and the rural countryside with maybe 3 or 4 houses and a road that some stuff might go down every once in a blue moon. The noise that the router is going to have to filter out to work properly is going to be like 1/100th of what I'm getting here noise-wise. So if you have any questions, please put them down below. If you've got some other thoughts on, how to make the router more reliable, or any router more reliable, put those down below too. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to come along for the ride, please go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.